At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
Welcome to the Ankler Podcast. I'm Elaine Lowe, author of the series Business Newsletter, here with the Wake Up's Sean McNulty, Ankler Executive Editor David Lidsky, and the Ankler himself, Richard Rushfield. It's Thursday, November 7th, just one day after Donald Trump was officially elected the 47th President of the United States, defeating current Vice President Kamala Harris. The mood out here in LA has been, I would say, somber, to say the least, as the town digests the election results. Richard, what have your conversations been like with the industry folk over the last day or so?
I would say compared to 2016, where the result was rage and hysteria, that it's much more resigned and subdued. People I spoke to were kind of grim, but sort of accepting and moving on, or moving forward, however that is. Social media, you still have some level of people sort of promising to set themselves on fire and everything, but just an air of resignation, I think, is what I felt.
Would you say there was a lot more surprise this time around? I feel like there were some pockets that were still genuinely surprised.
I mean, they're the people who wanted
weren't here in 2016, probably.
Yeah.
Well, you also had that sort of 72-hour turn starting Saturday night with the Iowa poll that I think led to a surge of enthusiasm, in many corners.
My read is that there was a lot of confidence, or at least a fair amount of confidence going in, was kind of just my read on things.
In 2016, nobody thought it could happen. It was just impossible.
And he lost. I mean, he didn't win the election. He won electoral college. So, in our defense on that one.
But it was not in the menu of possibilities that he could win. And certainly not with this electoral college thing. I didn't talk to anyone in the last 2 weeks that says, she's got it in the bag, we can relax. There's no reason.
I don't think anyone was relaxed.
I'm not even going to watch election night because I know it's so done.
I know what's happening.
Yeah. I think everyone knew that this was a toss-up at best. And, the most optimistic convinced themselves it was 60-40. But no, I don't think there was anybody who, forced to give the odds, would have said it was 90-10.
So, Sean, yesterday in the Wake Up, you broke down the winners and losers of Hollywood. And before we get into what
for the election, not in general, Elaine. Just to be clear, that was not just to for our listeners out there.
But before we break down what a second Trump term might look like for the people who live and work in Hollywood, I am curious as to how you all got your election news. Who was watching the Kornacki cam? Who was checking out Brian Williams on Amazon?
I was all the above. I was a omnivorous viewer, I guess we would call that. So I started on the Amazon and saw that was, I don't know what, I love Bri White. Carville was on there, great, but. Ooh, that was a muted affair, I will say. And I'm
muted is a euphemistic word for what that was.
I'm trying to find the right one, Elaine.
What was amazing was they built an election night from scratch, so they could have done away with anything. All the all the dreck and boring stuff from cable news, and they decided to recreate all of that. And then some.
Well, no, they didn't do it. They did no on-screen graphics.
Right?
He was reading on his phone.
To set the scene for our listeners who didn't tune in. Okay, I tuned in for a little bit. Sean, I think you watched more. It was basically election desk and your TV upon which there was a map doing the usual mappy election things. Right. And then a big, I don't know, it was either a green screen or a virtual production.
It's like what they shoot The Mandalorian on, like a soundstage kind of thing. Yeah.
With a big sort of screensaver of Middle America.
Sort of. Sure. I feel like I was in a pasture. I don't
sort of the White House
the White House was there
in a cornfield with Pontiac on the lawn. Or it was
it was
artist illustration of America. I'm not sure what that was.
Give it that way, but no graphics of anything. It was just minimal graphics.
There's also this huge set, so the desks were like a mile away from each other. So whenever the cameras had to pan back and forth between them,
it was
like
distance. Exactly. The cameramen were and women there were earning their paychecks. That's for sure. But yeah, then I said, in the newsletter I put on Peacock, or for the most part, the multicam lane. I was their Kanaki cam kind of mystified me because it was kind of positioned so his back was to his own camera whenever he was on the regular.
It was
feed.
it was like an alternate view, but from like an iPhone or some other GoPro looking camera.
It was like an iPhone on his desk, essentially. But yeah, GoPro, right? Yeah, exactly. GoPro back in the day. Yeah. Nice to have. I don't know that it had a lot of value to it, but nice to have the three angles there. But that was mainly it. But I was looking, on YouTube. I did list in the wake of it. Just I think it was David. What was the count? I don't know, 20.
Oh yeah, I mean you didn't even have all of them, but yeah, you had a bunch. I was watching one of those. That was how until I went to bed very, very early. But so I watched the YouTube live stream. That's how I was getting the results.
But you had again, back to the Amazon, there's no lacking, Elaine, of options to watch things on in this day and age. And the ratings were, down significantly. The broadcast ratings were down, I don't know, about 30%, whatever it was from 2020. So
did Amazon wind up releasing any numbers of their election coverage?
No. If they ever release numbers, it's going to be like the prime day numbers. It was the biggest one ever. Wait a minute. They never did one. It was
also your first one. Yeah, exactly. The first and biggest election night special we've ever had. So, yeah. No would be the answer there. No info. No info from anybody. Peacock and no streaming information. It was only the Nielsen's and kind of de rigueur of what the streaming silence is for everything as it carried over to this thing. So not helping the narrative that the old media, nobody's watching. I'm like, well, if you release the other numbers, maybe it would look better. But, they don't do that, Elaine. So.
Well, then fast forward to Wednesday, you did a very succinct but apt breakdown of the potential winners and losers in the entertainment industry and the broader media space out here. Some of those were kind of expected. Like you're saying, MSNBC will probably pick up more viewers, the New York Times likely to get more readers, kind of people who are consuming the news cycle. But, you've also got Paramount here on this list and maybe Comcast.
Yeah, I mean, look, the whole thinking is, of course, and Richard mentioned this last week, the shackles are off for deal making as soon as, early mid-January rolls around here, which I've heard no one give a contrary account to. So, yes, obviously, Comcast is looking at things, and Warner Brothers Discovery, which we'll talk about in a little bit, was, this is going to kick things off. So that's out there. But, I mean, Paramount's also being sued by Donald Trump now. CBS, he's suing CBS News for the 60 Minutes edit for, what was it, like $10 bajillion, David, or something like that?
I think that's officially what
correct.
It is.
That was what it was. $10 billion.
Which seems like any one. So given that the harm might be difficult to prove.
Exactly. The damage might not be there for 60 Minutes. So we'll see, Elaine, about that. Obviously, Larry Ellison is, given to Republican campaigns. He became, I think, 5% richer on Wednesday, so that was a good news to hear. So, I think Paramount probably, they want to get a deal. Again, they want to get that. I've heard from quite a few people, they want to get that deal done by the end of Q1, even though they've said, they have allowed themselves to the end of Q2. So that's the hope there, Elaine, is I think it gets done faster than, maybe they were hoping or might have been in a different administration.
To your point, though, Sean, anyone with a news division, which is every studio, but Sony is a loser, to my mind. They are going to have problems because, I saw this. I couldn't believe it, but it's true that Trump criticized Fox on Tuesday during the day after he voted because they ran the clip of Oprah from the Harris closing night, rally. They were criticizing the clip, but they ran the clip, and he talked about how vastly unfair that was, and as if Fox was, in the tank, for Harris and in league with Oprah. So no one is safe. And I think all of it is going to be phenomenally fraught. And I think that basically anyone who could get out of the news business the fastest will be the winner. That's what I mentioned.
Well, I did mention SG&A budget, the overhead budgets for studios is a loser, Elaine, because there'll be more lawsuits and things. Legal costs may go up at anybody who has a news division, as David said. So we'll see about that.
And then you've got a couple of toss-ups in here, including WBD-owned CNN.
Well, CNN has a lot of things going on, so I don't know that this is going to be either way about this.
That was a generous putting them in the middle category. But again, I think that's also a loser.
Well, like you mentioned, they've got a new subscription program, right? I mean, there was the
Right.
The Trump bump there will be no Trump bump. That is also my. So I
mean
do
no Trump
disagree
bump
with
across
Sean.
the board
There will be
through
no
any news
MSNBC
media?
bump. There will be there will people, to Richard's
You think
point,
people are fatigued?
there's a resignation. People want to move forward. People are not going to wallow.
People love to
in
hate watch,
every
David. I don't know.
stupid
People
thing.
love to hate watch.
Trump is exhausted. Why isn't everyone else around him exhausted? Or just the entire country. I don't see it. I really don't think there will be any bump whatsoever for anyone in the media business.
But Elaine, it's also a little deja vu here. I mean, WB was going through a deal with AT&T the last time Trump was in office, and CNN was the big sticking point, right? And that was, so...
Yeah, and he was selling it to the biggest Republicans he possibly
right, AT&T,
they could have been selling it to,
yeah.
and it did not matter. And no one talks about that, and it's totally true. And it's the same. I mean, David Ellison is apparently a Democratic donor, but but obviously Larry is not, as you said.
Yeah.
I don't think it matters if there's anything that every one of these things. I mean, the Paramount deal will close and whatever.
Yeah,
and
I
they're
don't think that's really
stuck with it, and good luck. But I mean, it just doesn't matter per se. But I think everyone else, it's basically just like you're driving a truck filled with explosives over a rickety bridge with piranha underneath it, and good luck. And you have no idea what's going to set him off, and then you're just dealing with the personal peak of the president.
Predicting this whole thing is a fool's errand, as we've learned in the first Trump presidency. So I think people will persevere. We will keep a thought out for deal making, but in the end, a deal's a deal, and he is a deal making president. So
and you can see my predictions on the column today. So
Yes, I was about to say,
Speaking of
Richard. I mean, you
Laverne.
had some words of wisdom for the industry.
Well, I was trying to find the important part of this election story, like how it relates to us, and find some meaning in that. And the first thing that occurred to me is the difference in language between the way that Kamala Harris spoke to people and Democrats in general speak to people and the way Trump speaks to people sort of mirrors the divide in media we have today of that the Democrats present a very polished, lawyerly face. They make coherent arguments. They won't try to square every circle. They got a great attempts to avoid defending to any part of their coalition and every word that comes into their mouth and bringing in everyone, whereas Trump has a different approach to communication, as we know, where he uses language to bombast and offend. But what I point out is that with the Trump and sort of Republican way of communicating, for all its darkness and bombast and everything else, there is sort of a directness and a authenticity. Like no consultant would tell you, like, stand up there in front of your rally and just dance for half an hour. Like it's
right, telling it like it is.
Or insult the city of Detroit at the Michigan Economic Council or whatever it may be.
I thought it was interesting, Richard, the way you framed it was that the quote, its very self-destructiveness is proof of its authenticity. Its ugliness makes it real.
Exactly. You can criticize it for very many things, but you can't say it's canned and polished and fake and which is how they feel about politicians and Democratic politicians in particular. And it brings to mind...
Well, I think it's how they feel about Hollywood. I think I've heard it in the last, 24 hours that to some degree, there is just this feeling that like the effort, and you mentioned this in your piece too, about just the, every celebrity that comes out for the Democrats, like just people feel like that's an affront. And I think that's why you're seeing people migrate to independent spaces like on YouTube, because there's a rejection of all of that.
Yeah, all the endorsements and the big stars up on the stage with her, it's this very sort of aspirational, like, come follow us and in this great star-led vehicle instead of just, get in on this big mess we got here. We're smashing monster trucks into each other, so come and dive right in the middle of it, whatever the hell they do.
But what's the takeaway for the industry here?
Getting to that, bring you around. When I look back at, for me, the last summer in the industry, when you had all these Part A giant mega flops that happened.
Sequel franchise mania.
We have just entered this film vernacular where it's just so sort of polished and just focus grouped. and made perfect that it has lost all its meaning to people. People have lost their connection to what it is we do. And the way I described it is we're speaking to people in a Marvel Cinematic Universe voice in a YouTube world where if you look at any statistic of what people are watching and what entertainment they're spending their time with, YouTube dwarfs everything else combined. And, you throw in YouTube and TikTok together, and Hollywood products don't even exist on that chart, just in terms of the amount of attention span, and that people are willing, for it to be rough and for it to be inappropriate and to be bad and to have all sorts of terrible things and, not be polished because it feels like this is something authentic, this is something real, I am part of this journey, I have a relationship with these people here, whatever it is. And I think Hollywood needs to learn to speak that language or it will become more and more irrelevant.
It's interesting that you bring up YouTube because that is a salient parallel, right, of sort of ignoring the populism of what people want.
Well, that's part of it too. But I mean, look at the box office. Second biggest hit of this year is Deadpool. What's Deadpool? An irreverent, be given a big middle finger to Disney, to comic books, it's exactly what you're talking about, Richard. So it is being produced, and that movie was a third movie in that franchise, and it doubled the U.S. box office of the other two movies. I mean, it's more now than ever. That movie was received well because it's doing exactly what you're talking about, Richard. It's very rare, that kind of film. And we go back to maybe Elaine to Barbie last summer. Different kind of thing.
Barbie was in many ways the same.
That's
sort
what I'm
of
saying.
thing.
What's exactly right. That's what's the hit of the summer. Deadpool. Inside Out's the other one. That's a different category. But Deadpool was made more than before this summer by far. So take those lessons. So look at like next summer, Richard, where it's like, if you're doing Mission Impossible 8, you better be coming with something fresh there. Like if you're coming back with just another Tom Cruise jumping out of a plane thing, like I don't know that you should expect anything more or probably worse than what you got, with 7, Richard.
Hey, some of us like watching Tom Cruise jump out of a plane.
There is something to that. Maybe I shouldn't pick up, a Superman movie or Captain America. There's all these things are coming out this year. It's like you better come with something that has something to it than just, as Richard said, this 8th or 10th version of something that just kind of feels warmed over and it's doesn't have that to it. So there's some lessons to take there for sure.
Yeah, it's never people want everything to be this one way.
No, of course.
People go back and forth, and they want the YouTube video of people skateboarding to the walls, and then they want to have a romantic comedy.
Sometimes you want pies and faces, Elaine, right? And it's yeah.
But it's become very much the language of how I have young children, and I just can tell you that is what they know, and that is what they feel relevant. And Hollywood productions, be they TV shows or movies, it's just like there's this thing that happens at certain times, and they're open to it, and they even enjoy it. But that's the water they swim in, and we better learn to connect with that.
But even celebrity, Elaine, just in terms of obviously the plethora of endorsements that came out, all for Kamala, whatever, outside of Mel Gibson and Zachary Levi, it's Jake Paul, exactly. I'm saying it of that ilk, but for the most part, I think the overwhelming majority were the other way. But the disconnect of how. America voted with saying, hey, we're really pissed off about inflation. I can't afford things. And I don't think that celebrities get that message about things or have any real, and this is what kind of like country stars have this related. Even Luke Bryan's richer than a mother, but whatever. Most people perceive him as a regular guy, someone who gets what I'm doing or whatever it might be. And, celebrities become more of this, maybe I think you're saying like this aspirational thing, Richard, where it's like, yes, kind of be this, which is all well and good, but that relatability at a time where people are in pain, Elaine, is, that disconnect is coming a little more apparent to me in a certain subsect of the populace out there.
I wish we could do a test with an alternate universe in which Kamala Harris received no celebrity endorsements and had no stars on stage with her, and would be interesting to find out would
sway a thing at all. Yeah, Richard.
Do you think it worked against her?
I don't know how much it worked for her. You read about the lack of enthusiasm for her on college campuses, which if the Taylor Swift and all that were going to
Bad Bunny
was going to have an impact anywhere, it would have been there, and it just doesn't seem to have connected at all. And it had a cost on the other side that it made her seem like, okay, here's another Here's another Hollywood millionaire surrounded by Hollywood millionaires coming to tell us how we
feel
should
about
live
our lives, and exactly, not understanding the situations that are in, Richard. Exactly. I mean, David, we talk about this with or a little bit with the CPG or fast food companies. Like, all right, they heard you, they're lowering prices. What's
$5 value meal.
What's Hollywood doing? To say, we hear you, America. Anything along those lines. And again, it is aspirational. I get the aspect of Hollywood and celebrity, but again, and look, Kamala Harris to get 68 million votes here. It's not like it was 70-2 or something. It's like, all right, there was a large showing here, but it's a 5 million gap, about a 5 million voter gap there. So it is a subsect of people, but it just seems like, again, that disconnect, it just felt very real to me, Elaine, about just exactly what Richard's talking about.
Richard, do you know who the biggest winner, I think, in Hollywood will be of the Trump administration?
Tell me.
I think it'll be Ari Emanuel. Ari used to rep Trump, is friendly with Elon Musk, who obviously is very closely affiliated with Trump at the moment. Is the CEO of the company that runs his two favorite sports, arguably, and Ultimate Fighting and WWE. Linda McMahon is rumored already to be back in the Trump administration, maybe as Commerce Secretary. So I don't know what all that means for Endeavor and TKO, but I don't think it's nothing. I think it's nothing but good
not bad news.
For Ari, even though he maxed out as a Harris donor. I don't think it matters.
No, I'm sure Trump still thinks of him as that's my agent. So
yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure that line is open to him.
Yeah.
And, if you saw yesterday, the MPAA just the MPA now put out a statement congratulating him and looking forward to working with the new administration, which reflects the fact that they're going to have to work with the new administration. I mean, there's a lot of regulatory issues that are going to have a lot of impact on this industry. And if they can't figure out a way to work with them, from piracy to
AI to, whatever, exactly, deep fakes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There's all sorts of bad consequences coming our way. So,
yeah.
And we're going to take a little bit more of a look at what the future of regulation, or rather deregulation, might be in the industry after a little bit of a break, where we'll also then talk about Warner Brothers Discovery's earnings report and CEO David Zaslav's comments on the new administration and how that might impact the future of that company. All right, we will catch you after this break.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Hi, I'm Ashley Collins, and I write the Dealmakers newsletter for The Ankler. Dealmakers guides readers through the intricate workings of lawyers, agents, and bankers, with insights exclusive to The Ankler covering the fast-changing state of deals, film finance, M&A, and the new frontier of AI law. I also interview some of the biggest names behind the industry's headlines, the people moving the entertainment industry forward, one DocuSign at a time. Dealmakers comes out every other Tuesday as part of a paid subscription to The Ankler. So please join me by subscribing today at theankler.com.
All right, welcome back to the Ankler podcast. We are here for part 2 of this conversation with, again, a look a little bit further at how the election might impact the entertainment industry over the next 4 years. Now, Richard, in your column, you also floated a couple of possibilities, companies that, big tech companies that have a foot in the door of Hollywood that might be able to make some moves over the next few years, including Apple and Amazon and Google parent Alphabet.
Yeah, and as I pointed out, all these companies have at least a foot in the door of Hollywood, if not more.
A couple dozen $1 billion on hand, too, which is always helpful.
Which have, they have $60 to $100 billion in cash to play with. And they've really sat out the M&A world for the last 4 to 8 years. They've done very little. And, they're here going through the trouble of building up their own studios in case of Amazon and Apple when they just buy one.
Well, Amazon did buy one. I mean, they bought MGM, but yes.
And they bought a little one.
But Richard, do you know the largest acquisition in Apple history and how much it was for?
I think I might know this.
Was it Beats?
That's my guess.
It was indeed Beats. It was 10 years ago. It was Beats. And does anyone know the price?
$3 billion.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So, Apple does not make big ticket purchases. And Amazon's biggest acquisition was the grocery store, the Whole Foods. That was, I think, $13 billion. These companies are not going to make some massive deal to acquire a studio, especially when, as Sean put together also this week, like their AI budgets, for chips and servers and data centers and all of that is so massive, and they can make so much money. Andy Jassy, the CEO of Amazon, said, that their AI business is growing triple digits year over year. Show me what entertainment product is growing at that rate. So I just don't see it. I just don't see any of it. I don't think big tech has any interest in this. The money is I mean, obviously they're in the business a little bit, but like
they want to get
I
further
just don't see
into
them buying
it.
studios.
Yeah.
I just don't see them buying studios.
David,
Period.
you don't see an Apple buying Disney or an Amazon
Absolutely
buying
not.
Sony
No,
scenario?
Absolutely not.
I say wait and see. I think they are very interested in Hollywood. They're spending, it's no longer just nickels and dimes. They are spending billions here every year to build something for which they're getting
it's worth over $3 trillion. It actually is closer to nickels and dimes.
Okay, but I mean, with a few years of what they spent in their production budget here, you could have a studio. You're building something from scratch and for getting very mixed results, where you can just buy something.
But a much lower margin business than, say, AI.
So my case for Apple has always relied on that. So if Apple can move the fight on phones, if they can move that 0.5% in their direction from where it is, fighting versus Google on who gets the phones, that 0.5% pays for 15 Disneys and everything. And so Disney, if you're looking at, in that fight, the most important people are the young consumers buying their first phone and their families just getting into the market. And what's a company that's as pristine an image as Apple that has an in to young people and their families?
Well, they have certainly tried to keep that image pristine, even with programming. Talking to agents over the last couple of weeks has revealed that Apple is still very much so on the no graphic, sexual, or violent activity on our shows, please.
No P-Valley
no cigarettes, no
on
sex.
Apple. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And what's another company that's close to that sentiment?
Very true, but Apple... I wouldn't say they're making shows for the kids. I think that would not be my sentiment of their programming at this point. Their approach has not been to appeal to the youth heretofore, Richard.
In 6 months or 2 years, we're going to do a special episode involving
where Richard says, "I told you so."
All the people who have told me I'm crazy here are apologizing to me.
I realize there's a different set of assets, but it's the same problem, as we all know, which is, there was the proxy that Paramount filed beginning of the week that, revealed that, basically far more people took a look at Paramount than, we necessarily originally thought. Comcast was there, the extent of
and for longer than was reported.
Dalliance was much longer than anyone thought.
Yeah.
And everybody looked at it and was like, yeah, if I only got the part I really want, sure. But otherwise, I'm okay. We're good. And so I think that especially these companies that are so fixated, the whole narrative, the way you become a $3 trillion market cap company is by being as obsessive as these tech companies are about their profit margin, that there's I just don't see it. They're certainly not going to take a bunch of assets that are a rapidly melting ice cube like the cable networks.
The one thing these people that run the companies don't like is to lose. And Hollywood might be a very small part of their portfolio, but just do a search of Getty Images and Tim Cook or Andy Jassy or any one of them, and just see how much time they spend tending to their portfolio on red carpets around here. And they're not winning. They're not winning here. They're making a lot of stuff, but they're not the dominant force here. And Apple is certainly not winning.
No,
and that's got to hurt. They like to win.
But is that really the goal? Do you think Apple's goal is to win at
no idea
Hollywood?
what they're doing here.
Are they really looking to get to the scale that like a Netflix or a Disney has? Because that's not my impression.
I think they look in everything they do to be the premier brand in everything they do.
Obviously, we could debate the merits of what I'm about to say, but I think Apple looks at all of its spending on Apple TV Plus in their marketing budget. and that, that to your point of a minute ago, it does create a bit of a gloss, on the entire Apple experience that, they have these relationships with, these stars and, directors and what have you. But, like I said, I think it's just part of their marketing.
This year, Tim Cook is going to have to sit in the audience and watch Brian Roberts or Ted Sarandos or someone else take home a lot of prizes and make a lot of speeches while he sits there nicely at his table, clapping along. And he is not going to be happy on that night.
I just got to question how much these tech heads really care about a couple of Emmys and a couple of Oscars.
They care a lot. They care. I would go as far as say that you could talk about the marketing and you talk about the fit, and I talk about how it helps the phone. That's the entire reason they're here. A shiny prize has been waved in front of them, and they want it. And Apple won it once, and they really liked winning it a lot. I've heard from a lot of people how much they liked winning it. Yeah. They want more.
But at a price. Again, I think the tech, it actually ties, I think, to a degree with the earlier part of our conversation, which is that I think there's more an interest. I think it's just part of the mindset of just we want to build our own thing and have it be successful. And that eclipses the old thing versus we're going to acquire the old thing and get bigger. I just think that it's just so baked into the way tech people think that they are these great builders, again, to use that word. And that's the approach, not like I'm going to do it by acquisition, which I think is the Hollywood approach.
Yeah. Although, there is a very good chance now under a second Trump administration that we will see more rounds of consolidation over the next couple of years, with less regulation, less antitrust scrutiny. Sean, you were listening to the call with Warner CEO David Zaslav this morning, and he said, quote, "We have an upcoming new administration. It's too early to tell, but it may offer a pace of change and an opportunity for consolidation that may be quite different and that would provide a real positive and accelerated impact on this industry that's needed." What was your takeaway from that?
Again, this is just reiterating, just open for business. Look, no one's of the opinion in Hollywood that where we are right now feels right. No, you have too many people losing money and you have too many services and too many people complaining about, X, Y, and Z. It's this isn't, this feels like a very, very mid, to use a TV term there, Lane, as to where we're going to be. And now it's all right, well, this starts in January and we have about, everybody from, Ari to Vince Accara to his next 18 to 24 months is going to be a period of, how's this going to shake out?
Well, two things. One, I heard this, in preparing to chat with all y'all today. There actually was more deal-making activity in the Biden administration than there was in the Trump administration. And everyone just wants to ignore that because obviously Lina Khan is, the FTC chair and, is a significant presence. So that's, first of all, it's all operating on this myth that everyone's been hamstrung and now finally we're free. But you have to have buyers. That's number two. There are no buyers. Nobody wants this stuff. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of the Paramount thing is everybody looked at it and goes, okay.
I didn't say the deals are going to be great, David, but there's going to be deals because it just I'm not saying they're going to get the prices they want for it. There will be winners and losers in that regard.
Right. But I think there's a difference between the part that no one wants to, or at least has not been fully articulated, is that there's a big difference between I'm going to dump, TV Land and MTV and whatever else on Blackstone or whatever to wring every penny out of it, in private equity deal versus the kind of, matchups that, Richard is envisioning. Well, those are just two very different kind of deals. And there's almost no issue whatsoever from a regulatory standpoint that
I
I
don't
foresee with Apollo or any other giant private equity
outside of a broadcast
acquiring a bunch
network
of
or something.
declining assets.
No, I don't think the FTC is going to be prioritizing that at all. But Elaine, nobody wants to say, Elaine, is again, we say it all the time here, and no one in all this conversation, analysts and they love a deal, Elaine. So it's like they're going to be excited about whatever because there's money to be made. Okay, but the logic of it. And again, we've said these are cable TV companies, which is what the Warner Bros. Discovery earnings report again affirmed for everybody in the cheap seats. $5 billion of their $9.6 billion of revenue in Q3 is from the linear TV cable bundle. That is a cable TV bundle business. It has lost
from the business that everybody else seems open to shedding right now. When you're looking at Comcast and all of these other
I don't
folks,
understand
that's
exactly
the thing.
what Zaslav like. He doesn't. He can't. He seems just stuck. Like he can't.
Everybody's stuck.
Sort of say
there's an answer that would have happened by now.
Reduce.
That's why.
And he can't. He doesn't have the money to acquire really, without taking on all the debt that he's been trying to shed.
Well, that's been the question, right? How long do you keep riding this iceberg that's still throwing off a ton of cash, right? But like slowly melting.
Less cash. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, look at the numbers in a 2-year time period. The linear TV business at Warner Bros. Discovery lost $780 million in 2 years. It's that how much they just wrote off $9 billion from the whole business last quarter. I mean, this is happening. The cube is on its way out, and no one knows what the hell to do. So again, if anybody's going to buy these companies, you're buying a cable TV company. Sure, the studio is great, and the IP is fantastic, and the stream business is fine, but they're saddled with these things that still are at the center of Paramount,
and effectively,
Warner's, and
every day you wait,
it gets worse. It's not getting any better.
The less valuable it is.
Nobody has, Lachlan Murdoch was asked, do you have a boss? Everybody gets asked this every quarter or so. What's the bottom here? And he's like, I know there is one, but I have no idea what it is, was his answer. And it's like, nobody, they're all swimming in this and have no idea because they know the answer is, and Richard, it's your answer. It's zero. That's it goes back to that all the time. They have a pretty good idea where this is going.
And there's only one fix for that.
Please, what?
Which is
a transaction. A transaction. Yeah.
Transaction.
Who's buying? Again, it's back to David's point. It's private equity. Who buys? It's the newspaper business from 15 years ago. Who bought it all? Private equity. That's it.
Real estate is just a question of price. It's like
exactly right.
If a house isn't selling, it's because they've set the price too high.
You're overvalued.
There's a price at which it sells in seconds.
Yep. There's a price with it's just, Elaine, to your point, they still throw off some cash. They will throw off, but that cash is not going to go up over the years. It's going to go down. And who does that? Private equity. So that's what Comcast is studying right now. And everybody has these, things going on. But there's no answer here. There's an answer. This would have happened already. The answer is you owned a declining asset that you waited 4 to 5 years too much to sell. And you're stuck with it. And nobody wants it.
Because it was still throwing off too much cash 4 or 5 years ago to really consider selling.
Well, you got to make a pivot. That's leadership, Elaine, of someone saying, yeah, I know that, but I'm making a plan to invest in 2030, not 2022. And no one took that route.
The answer is they're two very smart people who had this figured out. Rupert Murdoch and Jeff Bewkes. And saw like, okay, time to hit the exits.
That's it. Rupert timed it best, and Jeff did his best to make that deal. And obviously, just AT&T was not the great home for it, but that was it. Everybody else, nothing. So here we are, Elaine.
And to your point, David, with the idea that there actually has been more M&A than perhaps has been credited for. I mean, I know at least on the ground, you talk to people who work in this industry, everybody still feels like they're coming off of several waves of consolidation. Like even the people who were part of the Disney-Fox merger 5+ years ago, the people who were part of Paramount back when, who still call it Viacom CBS, like we're still at a point where like people are calling things old names. That's how fresh we are off all these waves of M&A. Like there are studio execs who got laid off a year or two ago who this all still feels pretty fresh to them.
Yeah. Well, Disney just shut down, again, they're still figuring out their TV studio business, Elaine, and this is late 2024.
4 or 5 years after. And then they're like, actually, ABC Signature is
very natural to have that feeling of like, this is, but it's just going to be 2 more, but at least 2 more years of it ahead. But how to make the math work, you got to get off the cable business and find your new thing. And it's like, that's tough.
Just feels like if consolidation is where we're headed over the next couple of years, that's not going to be great for the job market. That's going to mean more waves of layoffs for the industry.
I mean, in the cable business for sure.
The way in which Elon Musk is arguably the most influential person in all of business and is that he acquired Twitter 2 years ago, and he basically fired 75-80% of the staff, and somehow, through whatever, spit and baling wire, the site is still up, and everyone's like, see, you can do it. So
at what cost?
That whole age of efficiency and whatever, that's all when that kind of kicked in, and every CEO just became besotted with Musk for pulling that off.
More with less. There you go, everybody. That's, the good old mantra.
What were some of the other headlines from Warner's earnings today, Sean? Like outside of Zaz's comments, which I think took up a lot of oxygen.
Yeah, I mean, look, the stock was up 10% on this report, which is still, again, I think is probably more related to the M&A excitement on Wall Street, Elaine. I mean, but they also had their biggest quarter of subscriber gains ever in streaming, Elaine, which is
decent streaming numbers, right?
Well, depends how you view that, Elaine. So this is a very retro. This is a very.
It's like 2021.
This is an old
kind
Disney
of enthusiasm.
Plus headline where it was like.
I was going to say 3 years ago, these would have been great numbers.
Exactly. And Wall Street's reacting partially like, I'm like, we had this conversation 10 times in the past 4 years. What happened here? But this is like the Disney Hotstar number, the India numbers at Disney inflating their numbers and be like, oh my God, it's amazing. And like, no one's looking at it and saying, you're making 80 cents a subscriber on 20 million of those, So all the growth at Warner Brothers Discovery had 7.2 million new subscribers in Q3. 7 million were overseas. 200,000 were in the U.S. They make $12 a subscriber in the U.S. They make $4 a subscriber internationally. Growth is nice, and they're entering new countries. They just launched in Japan in Q3, and France was the end of Q2. So again, new territories, you're going to add subscribers. That's great. You add 7 million. But again, they have a revenue problem, and that the decline of the cable bundle is accelerating faster than the rise of this, streaming money is coming in the door. And the money that's coming in the door is in lower, revenue regions of the world. So they got to get that math right if they're going to make
just the same narrative across town at so many of these other companies. Yeah,
I mean, Paramount was tomorrow morning, so we'll see what happens there. I'll break those numbers down in the Wake Up for the Friday edition of the Wake Up. So they're generally a little bit better about offsetting, or they have been before, but offsetting that decline. But at Warner's, that's, again, 7 million subscribers. Fantastic. That sounds very healthy. But you just look at the number, the money underneath it, and it's like, I don't know, but the TV business is doing well, though, Elaine. So there's some good news for series business.
Yeah, I mean, $5 billion in linear TV revenue, and
the studio, the TV studio is doing very well. Their revenue is up 30% year over year. Granted, that's against the strikes, but still,
true.
That was a positive note out of Warner Brothers. So that was coming out. So,
although I will say on the programming side, and this is a topic for a series business newsletter in coming weeks, but I do hear that on the programming side, there's just been a real cutback in budgets, a real tightening of things, and they're not like really buying. I mean, they're looking at Harry Potter and all of that, and trying to build on their in-house IP, but they are in austerity mode.
And Elaine did tout that the Penguin is a big these staples that they're trying to grow Max with, The Last of Us coming back, things like that. So yeah, I think you're right. If it's those bigger ideas, their game. But yeah, that's interesting. To hear though about the leanness of maybe the approach that they're taking there. So.
Yeah, possibly the leanest of all of the prospective buyers around town that I've been hearing about lately.
Interesting.
So that's sort of an interesting note. I mean, obviously on a much larger company here. But yeah, going back to another comment that Zaz made, he says that if the best content is going to win, there needs to be some consolidation in order to have these businesses be stronger and have a better consumer experience, end quote. So, I mean, and this is, again, not stuff he hasn't said before. This is stuff that he's, signaled in the past, but certainly seems to signal some more enthusiasm for it in the wake of this week's results.
We shall see what transpires, yeah.
I joked with Sean, the United States, the land of 10,000 breakfast cereals. Yeah, you know what they like? They want less choice. So,
yes, things are going to happen, Elaine, but nobody has any idea what they are. So that is essentially, that's why
you know how people love uncertainty, Sean.
They really
how this industry loves uncertainty.
Yes. Everybody tells you that all the time you're reporting, right, Elaine? That's their favorite part of the business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They love not feeling certain about the ground they're standing on, which is unfortunately what I'm hearing a lot of lately. If we have any listeners who have any thoughts about how things are going to be over the next 4 years, or about their how you're feeling, feel free to give us a holler at podcasts@theankler.com, or you can reach out to any of us at firstname@theankler.com. And of course, make sure you're subscribed to all of our socials where we've got the latest news for you, and from where you can subscribe to our suite of lovely newsletters, from Sean's prolific The Wake Up newsletter every day, to Richard's columns, to Minori and my series business. As always, thanks so much for listening, everyone, and we will see you next week.